Hi, I'm your host, Reena Suri, and welcome to Thriving Changes, a place where we share stories from brave and courageous people who have navigated challenges, crisis, or a change in their personal or professional life and gave it a new meaning. It's a platform where leaders open up about their fears, vulnerabilities, and the journey that led them to triumph. Our hope is to inspire and motivate others to take their first step towards thriving changes. Change is constant. The changes we face in our professional and personal lives can cause anxiety, doubt, and insecurity. It can impair our ability to engage and progress. Additionally, most of us live in an increasingly demanding environments where stress and the risk of burnout are high. Understanding the change process and then applying that understanding in our everyday lives helps in building resilience and supports us in navigating through change with confidence. In today's podcast, we have with us Blanche Roberts, who leads Change Work Partners. She works with professionals and organizations facing change or seeking to orchestrate change. Through her education, consulting, and coaching services, she helps them move through change with resilience, skill, and confidence. I hope you enjoy this podcast. Welcome, Blanche. It's so nice to have you here on Thriving Changes. What a pleasure and honor. We go a long time back together. You've been a great mentor, a great friend, and I'm so happy to have you on Thriving Changes.
Oh, I'm honored to be a part of your awesome podcast series.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I am so excited for our conversation today because I know that this is what you live and breathe. This is all you change, understanding transitions, understanding what people go through during this time, any time of change or a challenge, or if they're going through a difficult time, a crisis, and your resilience workshops and even your workshops on work transitions have been so powerful, and I witnessed those at CTC. And so I know that this is something that you will shed so much light on and demystify the process. It's hard. And when people say, I've heard it so often that change is
Mhm.
hard. But I've never really heard anybody explain that why is it hard? What goes behind it? To understand that those emotions, that upheaval that we go through. And I'm sure all of us have gone through some sort of change.
Oh, yeah.
Even if you've been fortunate to have never encountered a difficult time in your life, but I guess we've all transitioned from one stage of life to another.
Mhm.
And that newness can be, that's change. From
Mhm.
high school to college, from college to work, changing jobs, that's all part of change. And of course, it can be very different if it's something difficult, like maybe you've been laid off, or you've lost a family member, or retiring, or something, no, which is
Mhm.
a little more of a setback than just normal change. We always start from here, where I seek my guests to tell our audience who they are, what they do, and give us a little background of what makes you you.
Oh, well, what a setup, Rena, and goodness gracious, life is change. Is that probably the best way to sum it up? And looking back, I've been interested in the topic of change throughout my life, whether we're talking personally about the many careers that I've had, family changes, changes in schooling, jobs, mergers, layoffs. I spent time in the banking industry at like the Northern Trust and a bank that became part of Chase. Then I moved over to the management consulting side with the likes of Arthur Andersen and Price Waterhouse Coopers. And in the consulting world, I became very professionally curious, if you will, because I had many roles as a leader who was responsible for changing things, for leading a project. It was interesting because I am motivated to try to do a very good job. And I don't know if you're familiar with the tech research and consulting firm, the Gartner Group. I remember coming upon a study that they did that showed that, and by the way, some of my projects were technology systems implementation. They said up to 80% of them fail. And I'm thinking, I don't want to start this effort knowing that I'm going to fail. So I wanted to be a student of how to better lead and how to facilitate a change management project. After the management consulting career, I made a major shift into the world of training and development, into that industry, as I've always had a passion for learning the value of skills and education, especially the soft skills. And so I think when we talk about dealing with change, we're probably talking about something that is among the softest of skills. And so during that transition, I also became a career coach and then later got certified as a resilience coach and an educator. And so it was at the Career Transition Center that I met you. And after years of coaching, I even stepped into the role of director of programs and coaching at the Career Transition Center. So over time, my focus has evolved to really try to inspire individuals to deepen their personal resilience skills when facing change.
Got it. Yeah. So that is like volume of experience in this industry. This is, you've seen it all from an organizational level
Mhm,
to a personal level and how it affects every aspect of it.
mhm,
So I know you've mentioned, I saw it in your bio as well, that when you say that you address the personal side of change and you work with professionals and organizations that are in transition, or so help us understand a little bit better what you mean when you say that you address the personal side
mm.
of change.
Yeah, it was kind of organic when I was at the Career Transition Center doing the coaching, career coaching. And of course, I met with many clients after they had been fired, laid off, and really saw how they were struggling, were devastated, really stressed out, even depressed, and just stuck in job search, let alone could really step into doing some of the actual job search activities. And so I kind of wondered what's going on and how could I perhaps help more than one person at a time? Because that's typically what I did in coaching. It was a one on one. And so I really became even more curious now about dealing with change, but this time on an individual, personal level versus project, team, or organizational level. So I sought out experts looking for the wisdom, the tools, the resources, and oh my goodness, there's so much out there. It's actually overwhelming. There's so
Mm.
much information. And so I came up with the idea of trying to put together a workshop to offer not just information, but really to try to guide these clients on how to apply the wisdom, the tools, the resources, how to develop some practices to really help take better care of themselves while facing change, particularly this job situation. And they often were facing other changes at the same time. And
Mm.
so the other piece of this that was exciting to me was to also do this in a small group setting. So the workshop that I thought was even more important for them to share this learning experience with others and to really appreciate that they're not alone facing this.
That cohort environment, the interactions, just listening to others and their stories can be, it can play such different roles. They can be, it's like a validation, you feel normalized, you feel like you're not the only one, you don't feel isolated, and they can be such a support system. Just having a
Indeed.
conversation, yeah,
Yes.
and
Yes.
it makes such a difference just to talk to somebody who understands what you're going through. So, yeah, so tell me, why do we need to study change? We spoke about it, that everybody says it's so hard, but nobody really understands it.
It's such an old topic, okay? People have been dealing with change for forever. And I like to share a quote during the workshop from the Greek philosopher Heraclitus. He's actually
Mhm.
from the 4th century BC, even before Socrates. And his quote, quite pithy, is the only constant is change. And this is not new, this idea of change and that we've got to deal with it. In fact, it's naive, I believe, to try to pretend like change isn't going to happen because it's always happening. And I really believe that dealing with change, the reason to study it is to really look at it as a life skill, and that it's there are ways for you to face and deal with changes. I mean, think about this. We are with ourselves 24/7, 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. And so I truly believe that you're going to be facing change. And I look around and I see healthy life skills, if you will. I don't know about you, but that's not a typical class that people had in high school, college, anywhere else. We may have had technical skills, other kinds of skills. And so studying change, I thought it would be important to really look for what is it that we can use to help ourselves to be more resilient, more confident, and experience less distress and struggle when dealing with this reality. During the workshop, one of the things that I ask participants to do early on is to share the first word that comes up when they hear the word change. And oh my goodness, do we get a wide range of responses. Some are upset, some are angry, some are shocked, fully in disbelief. Some feel guilty, numb, sad, perplexed, confused, stressed out, afraid, worried, exhausted. And some, believe it or not, are even joyful. And so the takeaway for that wide range of responses, I think, just highlights the fact that change affects us all differently. And that's why dealing with change is such a personal experience.
So, what is change then? How would you define change?
Yeah, and I think it is so important to define it and to be specific because it means so many different things. And in the workshop, I like to set the stage by distinguishing between two key words. I highlight change versus transition. I don't know if you're familiar with William Bridges' book. This is back in the 1980s. It's called Transitions, Making Sense of Life's Changes. He's actually the one that made this distinction between these two terms. So I'm really picking up from him. He wrote that change happens, but it's transition that is the work that we do. So change is situational. It's that which is happening externally. It's happening outside of you. A new organization, change in the law, change in the business, society, family, politics, rules, systems, you name it, outside of you. Transition, on the other hand, is internal. It's the psychological, the emotional experience, all that goes on inside of you, what you're sensing, what you're feeling, what you're thinking. And I don't know about you, most of us tend to stay focused on the external. And so the challenge is that we're often just clueless, unaware of the internal. And as a result, as Bridges himself says, we often handle change badly. And so I focus on helping clients with this, the what's going on inside, because it matters. It's a bit complex, it's very personal, and you are the one who has to do the work.
That is so well explained. I have never heard, honestly, I'd never heard about this book. So, this I'm definitely going to look into because this is fascinating to me. And I have never had anybody explain this to me in such a manner. Having been in this industry for the last almost 10 years now, I have never heard this kind of a very clear and precise definition of change and transition and making it so distinct.
Mm,
And even when I was exploring the mission of this podcast of Thriving Changes, one of the goal was that very too often we are focused on the outside
yes.
and everything, our circumstances, the people in our lives, or whatever we want to change. And we are so focused on the outside that we don't look inside. And the real work, and this is especially true when we want something to change and it's not happening.
Mm-hmm.
So you're talking maybe from the aspect that something has already happened, a change. But normally, when I was thinking it from a prospect that when we hope for a change, maybe a new job, maybe a transition, maybe a promotion, maybe a toxic environment, and how to get out of that situation. And people are so focused on the circumstances that they fail to look inside. And real change happens when we start looking inside. Things may not change instantly. When we change and we change our mindset, our perspectives around things, and how we are behaving, how we are responding rather than reacting, that's
Mm-hmm.
when
Indeed.
things
Yeah.
start changing. And so I just love this. So tell me, when we are going through change, obviously there's just so much happening around us. And again, you said that not just outside, there's so much happening internally within us. And it's not just one emotion that we feel, it's a number of emotions, and we may transition from one to another, and we probably don't even realize when we've transitioned. I'm just speaking from my personal experiences, having gone through so many transitions in life, professionally, personally. So I would fail to understand. It was very challenging to understand, okay, why am I feeling the way I'm feeling, even if it was an informed decision. Like I informed decision, okay, we as a family decided to move from India to the US. Now
Mm-hmm.
that's a huge change. It's a
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
transatlantic, new culture, new environment, and we knew what we were getting into, and that it's going to disrupt our life for some time, and it'll take us time to settle in. And there were times when I failed to understand what's happening with my son, or why is he feeling the way he's feeling, or with my husband, or as you said, inside me. So help, and I think I'm not alone in this.
Not at all. Not at all. You've hit on quite a few there. And let's be honest, we're kind of taught to stay focused on the outside. We're not
Hmm.
ever invited to look inside. And the truth is that both are happening at the same time.
Okay, let's just dive a little deeper into it. What do we go through? What do we humans go through when there is a change? Why is it so challenging?
Well, I just want to highlight because you did put out there that there's so many flavors of, I call them flavors of change, that I make in this workshop. I make yet another distinction so we can get even more specific between unplanned, involuntary changes versus the voluntary, the ones that you're specifically choosing, like moving to another country, starting a hobby, planning a trip. Those are the orchestrator of that. I'm focusing on the unexpected, unplanned, the surprises. And the key is that they're out of your control. My focus is on the unplanned, unexpected ones because they trigger, they open up this thing called uncertainty in a big way. They disrupt that inner sense of control that we might have had. And what ends up happening is when, and again, that change, that unexpected change could just be announced. Perhaps it hasn't even happened. But what happens inside of us is that we start to ask a lot of questions. Those questions don't have answers yet. And so that creates a lot more. What will happen to me? What will happen to my family? We just ask all kinds of questions, lots of what ifs, which are essentially worries. Answer them. And so these questions trigger inside of us our fears. And for some, depending on the situation, threatens your survival, your identity, even your existence. Now, I can share that when I was at Arthur Andersen, and for those of you who may remember, I was there for 7 years. I was there when the unfortunate thing happened with Enron, and essentially the entire firm over some months dissolved. And I remember vividly thinking up all of these questions, these what ifs, and just stirring myself up, getting very stressed, getting very worried. And so all of this uncertainty, which is what's going on inside of us, it threatens our whole being, and it especially affects our bodies.
Mm, that's so true. And it is the things, it causes anxiety, it causes stress. People go through sleepless nights.
Mm-hmm.
We are unable to focus on work. We are like in a daze and just walking around, not knowing what's next. And it's interesting. And that's why it is so challenging. So, obviously, when it hits us, for example, just even like you mentioned, a health diagnosis, I'm at a stage where I invariably have to go for a test every year for some reason. And I'm like, oh, I hope it's not something scary. And so help us understand, how can we go through it when we don't have the answer? I have to wait for a result, but I'm still anxious till the
Mm-hmm.
time that result doesn't come in.
Mm-hmm.
So what can I do to calm myself, to be a little more in place?
Well, first off, I'm glad that you appreciate the impact on the body because it's not just what you're thinking, it's also what's happening inside of your body. And there's a lot I like to share so that people are more aware of what's actually happening to really know how we are built as humans. And so, a little bit of biology. I want to focus on the brain. Of course, I kind of just thought it was a blob, it's just up there. But in actuality, the brain actually has a lot of different parts. And what's fascinating is that these different parts have different functions and they evolved over time. So I'm just going to highlight two. The limbic system you may have heard of, the amygdala, it's the older one in us. It's actually been developing in us for over 250 million years. And its prime job is to look out for threats, help you survive. That's how humans have been able to stay around. We are not the biggest in the jungle, so to speak. Likewise, we have this newer part, the prefrontal cortex. Some call it the neocortex, and it's actually behind here. It's only about 2 million years old. Some refer to it as the rational, the executive brain, and it's actually responsible for maintaining attention, focus, helping to regulate emotions, decision making, and problem solving. But the interesting thing is that, and I never knew this, I just thought it was so fascinating to know how I'm built. These two brain parts, they actually process the sensory information, the sensory input that we experience at different speeds. And so, an example to highlight that is you're walking down a path in the jungle, and up ahead on the path, there's a coiled something or other on the path. That older limbic part of the brain, remember, it wants you to survive. So it senses a threat. And so it triggers the fight, flight, or freeze response, and it does it in 1 millisecond because it's trying to protect you. You might have to defend yourself. Depending on how you typically respond, you might look for something to then fight, or you might try to run away, or you just might cower and freeze. That prefrontal cortex, it's a little bit slower. Again, it's taking in the same information, but it takes 5 milliseconds to tell you, oh, it's not a snake. It's a rope. And so what happens, what's actually going on inside of you is that the older brain part, it triggers you to act almost what seems like it's instinctively because you're just so used to doing it, almost automatically, impulsively, maybe even overreact, while the newer part, the slower part of the brain, the prefrontal cortex, would have you respond differently, more intentionally, more thoughtfully. And to really ask yourself, and I do this in the workshop, to ask people if they perhaps have experienced this gap in the brain parts. Have you ever, sometimes people use the term acted without thinking, or said something, did something that you later regretted, or you say to yourself, I didn't mean to do that? Which brain part is telling you that? So, this built in gap that we have of the brain speeds of these two brain parts, so to speak, can help explain why we can experience conflicting thoughts and feelings when facing a threat. Let's call it an unexpected change. And it just triggers all of that fight, flight, or freeze, all of the symptoms that you may, and everybody experiences different symptoms when that fight, flight, or freeze happens, but that sets the stage for like a storm inside of you.
What's coming to my mind is that the Captain Phillip movie, uh,
Oh, yeah.
when he's rescued and he's brought to
Hmm.
the hospital,
Hmm.
and he's in that fight and flight mode
Hmm.
completely. He's been on trying to survive
Yes.
and save himself, and the first responder who's helping him, examining him, and she keeps telling him, you're safe now, you're safe now, you're safe now. It's like bringing it down gradually,
Right. It
that
can
he is.
take quite a bit to dial that down. Yeah.
Yeah. And so I know, I remembered I was attending it was a part of a workshop that this came up, and she had showed us this, and I asked her, I said, what if somebody is still in that, probably I'm not the first responder, I'm just somebody that this person is sharing with, but they'll still be going back to that environment where it's not safe.
Mm.
What do we tell them? And that's when she said that, then don't tell them that they're safe now, because you might be
Mm,
actually risking their lives.
yeah.
Because maybe it's an abusive household where maybe one spouse is still learning to deal with the situation and trying to maybe plan what's the next move or keep the children safe, or maybe they're still working through and they are in counseling, but this was a surprise eruption, or this is just an example to say, but that spouse might be going back to that environment. So don't tell them that you're safe now, because they need to stay alert.
Exactly. Yeah. And there's one thing to being alert and being on the outlook,
Yeah.
and being aware, but
Mhm.
it's also different that you're just triggered and you're not what's going
Aware of it. So as I said, that now this can be like we can become aware, like maybe we're working with somebody. How do we identify that we are triggered and we are not aware?
on. Very good question, because this is definitely a skill. And the tough part is how fast all of this can happen. And so, how do you create some space, some time for you to pause and check in with yourself?
Yeah, take a step back and
You see how quickly that amygdala, that limbic system, 1 millisecond, you're already you're already reacting, whatever it is that you're doing, but the prefrontal cortex is not even online, so to speak. And so to be able to intentionally appreciate that this is what goes on and to try to buy yourself a pause, because not everything is a threat to your survival. And how do you really try to help yourself distinguish? Now, I go on another biology thing that is to me just blew my mind away about us humans, is that the that threats that we imagine, the what ifs, these are threats that they haven't happened yet, but we're imagining that it might happen because we're built to look for threats to survive. It's something that we can imagine. A threat can be something that we imagine. Worst case scenarios, predictions, and our bodies. This is what's so profound. Our bodies cannot easily tell the difference between real threats, like a saber-toothed tiger that's running in front of you, which is very real, and others that you might imagine. They're all inside of here. Think conspiracy theories. Both imagined and real trigger the fight, flight, or freeze symptoms in our body.
it's so interesting. My previous podcast was with an applied neuroscience professor,
Hmm.
and he just spoke this, he literally said the same. He was speaking about pain, that our body doesn't know how to distinguish pain, whether it comes from heartbreak or a job loss or a loss of a family member. Pain is pain. And what you're trying to say is that fear is fear, no matter from where it's coming. But what we need to do is rationalize it, that okay, how true is it? Can this really happen? When we put in too many what ifs, those situations, some of them may not really happen, and we are just overthinking it. So dial it down probably a little bit and tell ourselves that okay, maybe it's not that bad. And
Really, you're really suggesting a key habit. And if you can catch yourself what ifing and just say, wait a minute, these are what ifs, because everything starts with awareness. But if you don't pause, it's really hard. This is not easy.
and somewhere I think I've learned, as you said, and it's a skill that I've learned. I was definitely all the what ifs person
Oh, really?
much of my life. And a skill that I did develop was that now when situations come, that when there are these what if moments and I am like waiting, let's say, for a response from somebody, and I'm wondering what it's going to be, or what happened, or if there is a delay, why is there a delay? And all the what ifs are coming in. But then it's that positive mindset, the growth mindset,
Hmm.
the abundance mindset, that whatever happens, it'll happen for the best. It's okay. And I keep telling myself, and immediately the minute I change that internal conversation, my anxiety goes down.
You've hit the nail on the head because the self-talk that we do, that we can cultivate, can really make the difference. And I also just want to give a shout out to the fact that us humans, oh my God, we have such powerful imaginations. When you think of some of the what ifs that we really can't imagine, and some what ifs actually end up leading to wonderful things, but many of them in response to an unexpected change, unplanned change, you can just spiral. But it really is how you talk yourself into becoming more aware, taking that pause, and just recognizing what your mind, what your body is doing, which is not what we've ever been taught to do.
There's just so much and great stuff. When you talk about, okay, so I understand that there are different models of change,
Mhm.
models that we have, and you are talking about doing workshops in it. So, what model do you recommend? How do you do it?
When I started putting this workshop together, when I was thinking about it, I became very aware that this was such an old topic. Philosophers, scientists, people have been studying this for thousands of years and have tried to describe what is it that people go through when they face change. And there's hundreds of models out there, different theories where it's like this is trying to help us. But one of the problems with most of the models is that they tended to focus on change as just an intellectual process. And what's been really exciting is are all of the discoveries in the realm of neuroscience that are waking us, Westerners particularly, to the fact that we are not just intellectual, rational beings as much as we think we are, logical beings. We have feelings, we have emotions. And when we go through change, a lot gets stirred up. While most of the models, also, what is really interesting, we know that each person responds differently to given changes. You can see that in your own family, experiencing the same situation and
Mm,
how everybody responds differently. But most of the models do agree, and I think this is very important, that we don't have a single experience when we're facing change. We actually go through a series of phases, stages, if you want to call it that. And one of the best models that I've seen and that I actually use and share in the workshop is one from the training company called HRDQ, their change model. And what I like about it is that it combines the intellectual, logical, and emotional, psychological, and behavioral experience. And they actually describe four phases: denial, resistance, exploration, and commitment. And a key thing about these four phases, we have to be very careful. It's not that we go lockstep in linear fashion, one and then the next and the other, but you'll probably experience them all. You may even go backwards and skip over. It's just that there are four potential phases. And each phase, what happens as we're moving through, our perspective shifts, our attitudes, what we're concerned about actually changes. And so one of the things, so it's not linear. And so I'm just going to paint a quick picture just so that you have a flavor for what each of these phases might seem like. Yeah. So the denial, this is the one, what change? Oh, is something happening?
Yeah.
You might not think it's real. You deny it. You're perhaps in shock and you're not even aware of any feelings. And
Mm.
what happens is that people in this stage tend to just like focus on a whole lot of other things. So you just you try to ignore it. And of course, we know that denial is not make it go away. The second phase is resistance. So what's happened is the shift from denial, you do start to open up and allow yourself to peek at or see that there's this change out there. You may even still doubt yourself and your ability to deal with it. Some people in the resistance stage get very stubborn, blame others, complain, focus a lot on the negative, but they do
Mm.
start to notice feelings, often anger, fear, upset, being very resentful of what's going on. And that is the second phase. Then a big shift happens in going to the exploration phase. Yeah, you're still feeling anxious and angry, and you're more and more aware of it, but you're starting to allow yourself to admit, to accept that external change, that it's here to stay, it's real, it's happening, even if you still don't like it. But what happens inside is you start to shift your focus from what you're losing or what you've lost or what you are missing, and you start to look more forward, shifting from the past to the present. And here's where your energy also shifts, and you start to open yourself up to maybe consider possibilities. Like, how might I make this change work for me? And so you might experiment. You might step out and learn new skills. Some people become very hopeful, and actually, a lot of energy gets released and feel excited. Some people even have fun, believe it or not. And then the last phase, which is called the commitment phase, this is you have adapted in your way because everybody handles it differently, but you now begin to see that that change perhaps it's now the new normal. You have mastered some new ways or integrated new ways into your life. You see yourself as being in control. You're more motivated, decisive, and confident, and you can feel successful about how you've handled this. And believe it or not, some people in the commitment phase may not even want to go back to the way it was before. Believe it or not, it just depends. And so this commitment phase is a time to honor how you have grown because of this unexpected, unplanned change that you have dealt with, and to really commit yourself because fasten your seatbelt. There are more changes coming, right?
Mm. Yeah. Absolutely. It reminds me, this is so helpful to understand the phases and to know that it may not happen in a linear way, that
Right.
I may feel one emotion or I might be in one phase at one time and then suddenly
Mhm.
from the second, I may move to the fourth and then go back to one and just keep that process and start accepting it. It also reminds me of the grief stages.
Indeed. A lot of overlap with that.
Yes,
Good
there's
point.
an overlap. In fact, there used to be five, and I think now they've added a fifth one, a sixth one to it.
Oh, really? Okay.
Yeah, now they've added meaning making to it,
Ah.
so that people want to understand why it happened. They give a meaning to it that, okay, this is the reason why it happened. It brings peace to them, that it's like closure.
hmm And that gets to really the commitment where you're honoring how you have grown, how you have transitioned relative to this change.
Yeah. So there is so much overlap in that because we might feel some similar emotions like anger or the resentment
hmm
or very similar. And so, yeah. Interesting how it all works. But it's such a different experience. We might say that there's overlap, but it can be such a different experience for every individual and depending on the situation. So we can't minimize what goes on.
You hit the nail on the head when you said depending on the situation,
Yeah,
because it's not even going to be the same for the different external changes that you're
yeah,
facing,
exactly.
and that's why there's no one size fits all. It just depends.
We don't realize we
Mm,
are all so differently programmed. Our mental setup is our filters. What are
mhm,
those filters?
mhm.
How we filter information, what our experiences have been, what our worldview has been. It all depends how we process that information and what's
Don't you
happening.
love how complex this can be?
It is,
It
yes, it
really
can
is.
be.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Mhm.
What kind of workshops do you offer?
Oh, allow me to finish talking about how we actually use the model, because you were describing, now that you're aware of it, noticing yourself. And that is why I wanted to offer it as a tool, because once you are aware that there are these stages of how you may be relating, I try to help people appreciate how they can get stuck and how we can actually make it harder on ourselves without knowing it. The model is nothing more than a reflection tool to give you some perspective and to help you become more aware versus just being caught up in fight, flight, or free reacting, or in
Yeah,
your habitual way. And I know I can share that. Goodness, once I got really familiar with this model, it's really interesting. First off, I have been in all of the four stages for different situations. I've been stuck and I even went backward. I could see myself. Oh my goodness. One of the things I notice is that I can catch myself sooner when I'm in denial. And you may know people relative to a certain change who are in denial. They don't know that they're in denial, and they may be in denial until the day that they die.
I like
This
that.
model just shows you that, and there are lots of reasons why you can stay so stuck. But I think the model is also the reason why I share it, is to help people have some compassion for themselves, for how difficult this is. And so, with that kind of, if you want to call it an academic or theoretical perspective with a model, then I spend a lot of the workshop, because it is a workshop format, not just a lecture, to really help the people who are attending the workshop to go from the model, go from the theory to action, to shift to practical action.
Got it. I'm so glad you brought this up because understanding the whole aspect is one thing, but actually doing something about is a whole different ballgame. So,
Exactly.
yeah, and we can just stay stuck. We can have all the knowledge, but if we don't do anything about it, it's of no point.
Yeah, if you don't
So,
use it, right? Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
so we dig into, and this is some of the work that they get to do. If you remember, Bridges was saying transition is the work that you do. I really invite and guide people to take this personally, if you will, and to really look honestly at themselves individually, to look at their level of will and skill, and to try to recognize, see if they can relate to the model, and really try to identify, because that's also what I try to help them figure out, is how to interpret now. Where am I stuck, or why am I stuck? And I offer questions for them to actually coach themselves so that they can get clearer about what they need, what they can and cannot control, and to just surface some honest insights to help them develop a sense of agency and to advocate for themselves
got it. So, is this is one workshop that you do?
through change with confidence. The first one that I
Okay.
created. Yes.
Yeah. And are there others that you offer as well?
Yeah, I actually, over time, actually started to go deeper and deeper into specific aspects of dealing with change. And so there is a workshop I created that just focuses on worry. It's called the Worry Workshop. And the tagline, because I'm not trying to help people worry more, but really how to embrace worry and move from misery to inspired action. And believe it or not, there are lots of tools available to make that. I didn't know what these were. I also do a building personal resilience
Mm.
workshop. And then the newest workshop actually focuses primarily on our thinking. It's called It's Not What You Think. And
Wow.
the tagline underneath that is it's how you feel about what you think that really matters. And so I help people to really understand and go deeper into looking inside to the emotional side because it's not just the thoughts.
Mm.
Yeah.
Very interesting. I just want to dive into each one of them. But we'll be going on forever. We'll need to schedule another time because the worry one is really exciting. I mean, it's such a normal part. We all worry at some point at different levels. It's a natural human response to certain circumstances.
Mhm.
And I'm really curious to know when you say you only do workshops, so can people approach you to just do individual coaching as well?
Yes. So I do one on one coaching still, whether it's career or dealing with change, personal resilience. But my focus is looking for opportunities for organizations, groups, teams, you name it, to hold a workshop, small group, because that's really the key because there will be work
Got it.
versus a lecture or just speaking on the topic.
So, how can they reach you if somebody is interested to explore working with you?
Let me keep it simple. Here's a couple of ideas. One is my email is changeworkspartners@gmail.com. Or if you use LinkedIn, connect with me on LinkedIn and it's Blanche E. Roberts.
Got
And
it.
you should be able to find me and we can connect that way.
Absolutely. I have some follow up
Yeah.
just thinking through this that, especially in the world that we live in today, the changing times that we are living in, we are just moving. I mean, from a very active lifestyle, we came to a standstill in COVID.
Hmm.
And then it was a gradual, slow pace movement back. But now suddenly I'm seeing this year, especially, things are like on the roll again, and some are resisting, and companies are trying to still figure out where they are, what they want
Hmm.
to do, whether every team wants to function differently. And we are going through such changes every day at work. We are moving to a more AI based platform. There's constant change happening around us. So, how can people stay relevant during these times, especially within their careers?
Change is constant. And there's no doubt in our modern times that we are aware of and surrounded by ever more of these external changes, because that's really what you're referring to.
Hmm.
And the fact is that we really do have to deepen and strengthen our ability to deal with these changes. To share a quote from the scientist John Lilly, because if you recall when we started at the beginning, that all of these external changes, particularly the ones that are thrust upon us, stirs up all of that uncertainty. And so we want certainty. We want to feel more secure. And I love this quote from John Lilly. He says, only security is our ability to change. And so cultivating your ability to know what's going on with you so that you can be the agent who addresses how you're going to handle each of these, and being also mindful of all of what's going on inside of you and being able to dial it down so that you can take a more thoughtful approach rather than just automatically reacting, etc. And it's not easy, but you do need more tools. And like I share with the participants in the workshop, they already know so much about change because you wouldn't have gotten this far. It's just now the pace as you indicated, there seem to be so many more externally that are going on that we need even stronger, richer skills with change so that we're dealing with them and they're not dealing us.
Yeah, so so what you're referring is primarily awareness of what's happening.
Everything starts there.
It starts there. So are there any specific skills that are relevant to adapting to change or to staying resilient?
The model and just thinking about that when you are, for example, looking at a particular change and asking yourself, so how am I relating to this particular change? Okay. And really talking to yourself, right? Am I in denial about it? Am I resisting it? Do I want to resist it? And to resist consciously is different than just resisting because you're reacting to it. Do I want to explore, figure out how I might adapt or deal with this? So it starts with you being aware of where you are at with a given change and starting to think through, am I triggered? And also, and that's a big part of what we get into in the workshop because there's more to look at in terms of what you can control and what you cannot control, and really identifying that because you may need support. A big part sometimes of dealing with a lot of these changes is we all need support, but you've got to be able to let people know either that you don't know what support you need or here's what I need as yourself.
And I'm thinking about it like even that exploration part, when you were saying that a lot of it comes when we are understanding that, okay, what are we resisting and
Hmm.
becoming aware. But then when we start exploring, then we can also come to these are the skills that I have. What change is happening, and this is how I can cope with it. But there might be things that I might need to learn to
Exactly.
deal with the change that is being enforced on me, let's say, that is being pushed on me. And
Hmm.
I will need to learn certain skill and to identify those skills and then figure out how to learn them or to find mentors or reach out to people who can support you in that journey.
Well said, because we aren't necessarily prepared to face every single change. It may require you to learn and grow.
Yeah. And that's what we do in our coaching
That's
sessions also
that's
when I coach.
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly.
That's how we go from discovering that what's happening to exploration that we all go through. When I'm coaching my clients, it's exactly that when they come, they might be in a certain stage, and then we coming just to the exploration part from that initial to exploration is probably the longest. And then the how happens like this, because once they have gone through the, I call it the jungle, that they've taken out the weeds and they've cleared it out, and then and it all comes from them that, okay, I can do this, I can do this, I can do this. And the how is so simple for them. It's defining
Hmm.
the why, the what, everything. Once they get that, then it's so much easier.
That is so well said because it really is a personal process, so to speak. And the shift from denial and resistance to exploration is really a big shift in energy because instead of the energy being trapped on denying or just buckling down and resisting it, you start to unleash that energy. And like you said, it's amazing how they just can turn. I've experienced it myself when I finally get to that point where, oh, I'm going to deal with this.
I know that I remember you sharing with me also that when you stepped down from the CTC role, and I asked you, I said, okay, Blanche, what's your next now? And you said, I'm in the discovery phase. I don't know. And I am exploring. And it was so nice to hear someone just be so vulnerable and authentic about it. And I think that was your strength,
Oh,
because being there with that space that, okay,
mhm.
I don't know, and it's okay. and it might take a while for me to have clear plan of what's next for me.
It doesn't happen overnight.
It
If
doesn't
only,
happen
if
overnight.
only.
If only, I
Right,
know. But
right.
then I sometimes feel that's the fun of it. That if we knew everything, then the mystery will go. Then what's the fun, you know?
Maybe not while you're going through it, right?
I get it. I get that.
That's why I said it's like, oh, I really like this now, or I
Yeah,
don't want to go back to the other way, but sometimes that's a little more in hindsight.
yeah, true. I get that. So
Ah,
tell me, out of curiosity, like through these changes, you've been through quite a few yourself, so many industries and companies and organizations, and you've gone through so many personal transitions as well.
mhm.
What are some of the skills that you've picked up during this time?
I can share with you that it's the moving through change that I did first. And
Hmm.
after doing it multiple times and the feedback and just seeing really how people, they had lots of ahas, and mostly it was them turning themselves on because I don't do it. It's like
Yeah.
I'm just the conduit. I don't do it. And I was pursuing my certified resilience coach
Hmm.
credentials. That was a year and a half long, and really going deeper, deeper into the emotional side of things, the building personal resilience. And then the worry workshop, because I really wanted to zero in on that whole experience. And I share in that workshop lots of very specific individual tools, whereas the model is more a reflection, kind
Hmm.
of thing. And the biggest lesson that I try to impart to people in that workshop is the importance of breathing.
Hmm.
You know, Eastern cultures have known this for hundreds, thousands of years, the importance of a pause
Yeah.
breath. Why do people say pause? When you get that fight, flight, or freeze in that 1 millisecond, it disconnects from your prefrontal cortex. Your IQ goes down. And so, to the extent that you can try to dial yourself down, and the oldest way of doing this known to mankind is through taking a pause and breathing.
Yeah.
I actually walk them through in the worry workshop a technique that I learned at the organization. Heart Math is the organization that I got my resilience training with. And it's a beautiful breathing tool. It's not meditation, because what I want is the people attending that workshop to leave with something that they can do anytime, anywhere. You don't have to close your eyes. And I do it all the time. You do it in line at the grocery store, you do, because there's so much coming at us that is triggering us. We can be in a constant state of, and so to just be able to pause, because then that brings those two brain parts more in alignment, and also with your heart. We're not machines. There isn't this instant switch, but you can do it yourself. They actually, in the workshop, they they experience it, and so many of them take it with them,
True.
because you just want your body to work with you, not just be caught up. That's
Yeah.
just the main one. There's a lot of other things too
Yeah.
that I
No,
share.
but I think that's the basic, because what it does is that, and it needs to be that deep abdominal breathing.
Mhm.
It's a lot of people do that's just that shallow breathing,
Yeah.
and that's not good enough. It needs to be that deep abdominal breathing, because what it does is it's that oxygen is it activates the brain. And as you said, because it slows down, and that oxygen activates it and regularizes it, and the left and the right get the food
Mhm.
that it needs to balance it out. And
Yeah.
again, it's very
So
complex,
that
but
in that workshop, the biology that I share is how your autonomic nervous system works. The breathing, there's an amazing book. It's called Breathe. I don't know if you've ever heard of it. Oh my God. It will have you look at breathing. And Nestor is his last name. His fundamental premise is that we do not know how to breathe.
Mm. True.
And it's such a great book. But the bottom line is, I teach people, because I provide the biology of how your autonomic nervous system works and how it is influenced by how you breathe. And when you were describing the shallow breathing, but then there's also another kind, we create a lot of our own inner distress because of how we breathe. And for me, I'm just the kind of nerdy person that when I understand a little bit of the what's going on or the how, why is this happening? Oh,
True.
that that is empowering to me. People, they don't care about the biology or whatever, but those are the kind of folks I'm trying to reach who really likes it's like all of that is going on and I'm doing it and you're responsible.
True. I get that.
But I never knew that all of that was going on inside of me. And yet we feel it all the time.
So we are almost towards the end of our podcast. And so, quick questions like a rapid fire. How do you look back at it all? Your career, your transitions, and now where you are at this stage of your life?
How do I look back? How would I summarize it? One thing I notice about myself is a willingness to change. I didn't say it was easy.
Yeah.
I didn't say because, oh boy, I didn't say it was easy because I had so many changes that occurred and many that I actually sought myself. And so I see that I wasn't paralyzed by change, which I really appreciate about myself.
Nice. Yeah. If you had to do it all over again, is there something you would do differently?
That's always a tough one because you start to say, would I be here where I'm at now if I had done something differently? I think one of the motivations that I have is the desire to share this education with others, hopefully catching them sooner than when I learned about it, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, I look around, it's like there aren't courses educating you on these kinds of life skills. And so, if I had some of these tools earlier, perhaps would I be further along? Is a question.
But then again, I say very often to people who are struggling, oh, maybe I should be doing this and I should be there and I should be there. But then very often I tell them that you are where you're supposed to be, that it's their
Exactly.
journey. The last one, what advice would you give to somebody who's going through a change, be it personal, professional?
You're referring to an external? Yeah, one of the tools in the worry workshop is just the power of journaling and getting the experience of how you are relating to that particular change, getting it out on whether it's paper or on your laptop or whatever. There is something to be said for how that frees you up. And in fact, James Pennebaker, who is like the, I think, global expert on expressive writing, shows this can be such a help in you looking at what you're going through. Because again, a lot of other people are probably telling you what you should do. You shouldn't be doing this, you shouldn't be doing that. But ultimately, it's you who is either going to step into it, not step into it this way, or whatever. And
And to discern if that is what you truly want. A lot of people will tell
exactly,
you what to do, but
exactly.
all answers lie within, and
Right.
you need to be connected to what's inside.
Right. That's why I so enjoyed being a discovery coach at the Career Transition Center because I was like, I don't have the answers,
Yeah.
but I do get to support the clients and to nudge them and create a space for them to allow those to surface.
Yeah.
Because it's
All
not,
right.
yeah,
Well, Blanche, thank you so much. This was so valuable. Knowing you for so long, I still didn't know so much about you, and I didn't know so much that you have taught in this workshop.
it's my honor. I so
Yeah.
appreciate it.
Thank you. Thank you for your time, and it's always a pleasure talking to you. If you found our content valuable, please like, share, and subscribe and spread the word. I think the best compliment is being referred. That one action of yours can help us reach more and more people and fulfill the mission of thriving changes. Thank you for considering.